mom believed she was protecting me by choosing all my classes, my clothes, and even my friends. She thought control meant love, but I grew up never learning how to choose for myself. The first time I realized I didn't get to make choices for myself was in 6th grade. The school handed out a list of electives: art, theater, robotics, music, advanced math. I picked up my pencil, ready to circle theater, but before I could, my mom reached over and marked advanced math. She told the teacher, "He'll do the accelerated program. No need to waste time." I stared at the sheet, my box already filled. The kids around me laughed about trying art or drama. I sat quietly, already on a path I hadn't chosen. That moment was just the beginning. Every year after that, my mom controlled my schedule like it was her personal project. Freshman year, AP Biology, Honors English, Algebra 2, Debate Team. I asked if I could try photography. She didn't even look up from the form. That's a hobby. Hobbies won't help when you're applying to colleges. Sophomore year, I mentioned creative writing. She sighed. Writing stories doesn't pay the bills. You need serious courses. Chemistry, calculus, debate. By junior year, I'd stopped asking. She circled boxes, signed my name, and handed me a schedule like a prescription. And school wasn't the only thing. She controlled how I looked. My closet was rows of neatly ironed polos, khakis with sharp creases, and stiff shoes that squeaked on the floor. Every morning, she laid out an outfit on my bed, and every morning I put it on. I remember one time in 7th grade, I wanted a hoodie bright green with a cartoon dinosaur on the front. It felt fun. It felt like me. She shook her head and said, "That's childish. You'll thank me when you don't get teased." She handed me a gray sweater instead, one so stiff it scratched my neck. I wore it to school while everyone else compared sneakers, traded shirts, and laughed about inside jokes printed on their clothes. I sat at my desk in silence. Friends were filtered too. If someone lived in an apartment, she said the neighborhood was bad. If their parents weren't pushing Ivy League goals, she called them unserious. One by one, my friendships faded. Playdates got canceled. Sleepovers stopped. By 9th grade, I was left with only the kids she approved of. Debate team partners, robotics club members, honor roll students. We studied together, but we weren't friends. We were co-workers preparing resumes. By 16, the damage showed. When people asked me normal questions, I froze. "What's your favorite subject?" I didn't know. "What kind of music do you listen to?" I had no answer. My mom only played classical or news radio. "Do you want to go out of state for college?" I panicked. The truth was, I didn't even know what I wanted. The worst moment was in my counselor's office junior year. She asked me what career path I was interested in so she could help build my college niche. Everyone else had answers: medicine, journalism, engineering. I sat there sweating, mind blank, until I repeated my mom's words. Something stable, maybe business or law. The counselor gave me a polite smile, but I could tell she knew it wasn't really my voice. That night I went home and looked at my room. Stacks of textbooks, schedules taped to a corkboard, every hour of my life already planned. I tried to picture my future, but all I saw were her choices, her pen, her handwriting, her voice. It hit me then. If she stopped choosing tomorrow, I wouldn't know how to live. I tested it the next day. At lunch, someone asked me what shows I liked. I froze. My mom said TV was a waste, so I didn't watch anything. I muttered, "I don't really watch." The kid gave me a look like I was weird. Another time, a classmate asked me what I wanted to do after high school. I said, "Business or law," the same line my mom drilled into me. They nodded, but I felt the distance between us. Everyone else was steering their own ship. I was just repeating a script. At home, dinner wasn't family time, it was performance review. She asked, "What did you score on your quiz?" If I said 92, she asked about the missing 8 points. If I said 100, she just nodded like it was nothing more than expected. Late one night, I went to the kitchen for water. She was at the table scrolling through Ivy League forums. Without looking up, she said, "If you want to compete, you'll need at least 3 leadership roles. Don't waste your time." I stood there holding my glass, throat dry, realizing she wasn't just planning my present, she was mapping every step of my future. Even weekends weren't mine. Saturdays were SAT prep courses. Sundays were productive activities. I watched kids play basketball at the park or hang out at the mall. I sat in a library cubicle under fluorescent lights, memorizing vocabulary flashcards. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the library window, polo shirt tucked in, tired eyes, pencil tapping. I didn't look like a teenager. I looked like an intern training for a job I hadn't applied for. Even teachers noticed. One asked me after class, "What do you enjoy outside of school?" I froze. She tried again. "Sports, music, hobbies?" I shook my head. "I don't really do anything." She gave me a soft smile, like she pitied me. I walked home slower than usual, dragging my shoes along the pavement, wondering if maybe something really was wrong with me. That night, my mom laid out another polo and khakis on my bed. For the first time, I didn't just feel tired. I felt angry. Angry at the shirts, angry at the closet, angry at myself for not fighting back. But the anger didn't last, because when you grow up being told someone else always knows better, anger turns into guilt. Maybe she was right. Maybe drama class was useless. Maybe photography was a waste. Maybe I really was too immature to choose. And that's the worst part, not just losing choices, but losing the belief that you deserve to make them. By the end of junior year, my resume was stacked with achievements. On paper, I was perfect. But inside, I was empty. I'd watch my classmates dream out loud: NASA, Broadway, startups, journalism, and I realized they had something I didn't. They had desires. I only had assignments. The summer before senior year, my mom spread a pile of glossy brochures across the table. Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Yale. These are the schools you'll apply to. Don't worry, I'll guide you. I stared at the names, chest tightening. Not because they were too ambitious, but because I couldn't see myself in any of them. I wanted to say, I don't know what I want yet. I need space to figure it out. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Silence had become second nature. So I nodded, and just like that, another choice slipped away. That's how it always went. One unchecked box on an elective form, one hoodie I never wore, one friend I wasn't allowed to keep, one dream I never tried. And slowly, piece by piece, I lost myself. Senior year was supposed to feel exciting. Everyone around me was buzzing about college visits, football games, prom. But in my house, it felt like boot camp. My mom doubled down on control. She taped a calendar to the fridge with deadlines for essays, SAT retakes, scholarship applications. Every box was filled with reminders she'd written in bold red marker. Submit draft, practice interview questions, review essays. It didn't look like a senior year calendar. It looked like a project timeline at a corporate office. One night she stood over my shoulder as I worked on a personal statement essay. The prompt asked us to write about a moment that shaped who we were. I stared at the blinking cursor, my mind empty. Who was I? I didn't know. I typed, "My mother has always guided me." She leaned in, reading as I typed, and said, "That's good. Make sure you emphasize discipline. Admissions officers love that." But I stopped. For the first time, I felt this wave of resistance rise up inside me. I deleted the line. She frowned. "Why did you erase that?" It was strong. I muttered, "Because it's not me." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't start getting stubborn now. This is too important." That was the first real argument we'd ever had about her control. It wasn't explosive, just a spark, but it shook me. The spark turned into a fire a few weeks later. It started with something small: shoes. I'd saved money from tutoring middle school kids in math, just enough to buy a pair of sneakers I liked. They weren't flashy, just simple black Nikes. When the box arrived, I carried it into my room like it was contraband. The next morning, I put them on, instead of the stiff dress shoes she always laid out. She caught me at the door. "Where are your shoes?" I looked down at the Nikes. "These are my shoes." Her face hardened. "Take them off. You'll look sloppy." "No," I said, heart pounding. It was the smallest rebellion imaginable, wearing sneakers, but to me, it felt like a declaration of war. She crossed her arms. "If you walk out that door in those, don't expect me to defend you when people judge." I walked out anyway. My hands were shaking the whole way to school, but for the first time, I felt like the ground under my feet actually belonged to me. It didn't last long. That evening, she threw the Nikes in the trash. "If you can't follow rules, you don't deserve them." I dug them out later, wiped them off, and hid them under my bed. But the message was clear. Every inch of freedom would cost me a battle. The battles grew bigger. College applications became the central war zone. She insisted I apply to a list of top-tier schools she'd chosen. Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, nothing less. I hesitated. What about state? Or maybe a smaller college? Somewhere I can figure out what I actually want? Her voice snapped like a whip. "Stop talking nonsense. You're capable of more than that. Don't waste potential." He was not never pace of that, with a do it poptic. "But I don't even know what I want to study." Her eyes flashed. "Then I'll decide for you. Business or law, stable careers. You'll thank me later." That phrase, "you'll thank me later," had followed me my whole life. But now, at 17, it made my stomach twist. We fought almost every week. Sometimes it was over essays she wanted to edit them until they didn't sound like me. Sometimes it was over friends she called the few people I hung out with distractions. Sometimes it was over nothing, just her need to remind me she was in charge. I started sneaking pieces of myself into the cracks, listening to music and secret songs my classmates recommended, writing short stories in a notebook I hid under my mattress, texting friends she didn't approve of, deleting the conversations afterwards so she wouldn't find them. Each secret felt dangerous, like I was smuggling contraband into my own life, but each one also felt like oxygen. One night, after another fight about college choices, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For years I'd believed her control was love, that maybe she really was protecting me. But now, all I felt was trapped. And for the first time, I thought, what if she's not protecting me at all? What if she's protecting her own idea of who I should be? That thought scared me more than anything. Because if it was true, then I wasn't living my life at all. I was just living hers. And something inside me whispered that I couldn't keep doing it forever. The breaking point didn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It crept in, disguised as little moments that piled up until they couldn't be ignored anymore. It started with the college essays. I sat at my desk late one night, the glow of the laptop screen painting the room in cold blue light. The prompt was simple: describe a moment of personal growth. For most people, that would have been easy. For me, the page stayed blank. What personal growth could I describe when I'd never been allowed to make personal choices? I typed a line: my mother has always guided me. My mom was standing behind me, holding a printout of deadlines. She leaned forward, reading as the words appeared on the screen, and said, "That's good. Keep going with that. Admissions officers love discipline." But I just stared at the sentence. Something inside me twisted. The words looked like a confession carved into stone. This wasn't my essay, it was hers. I hit backspace until the page was blank again. Her voice sharpened. "Why did you erase that?" It was strong. "Because it's not me," I muttered. She folded her arms. "Don't get stubborn now. These essays will decide your future." My red of the class. The argument fizzled out quickly. Neither of us screamed, but that was the first spark. A small one, but sparks spread fast. The next battle was about shoes. For months, I'd been tutoring younger kids in math, scraping together a little cash. I wasn't allowed a real job, my mom said. It was distracting. But tutoring was acceptable since it looked good on college applications. I saved every dollar, and finally I bought myself something I wanted. A pair of simple black Nikes. Not flashy. Just mine. The first morning I wore them, she caught me at the door. "Where are your shoes?" she asked, eyes narrowing at the sneakers. "These are my shoes," I said. Her tone turned icy. "Take them off. You'll look sloppy." "No," I whispered, barely loud enough to hear. But it was enough. My chest was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. She crossed her arms. "If you walk out that door in those, don't expect me to defend you when people judge." For a split second, I almost caved. I almost went back to my room and put on the stiff leather dress shoes she always laid out. But something in me broke loose. I walked out. All day at school, my heart thumped whenever I looked down at those Nikes. No one else cared. No one even noticed. But to me it felt like a declaration of war. That night, when I came home, they were gone. I found them in the kitchen trash can, buried under coffee grounds and vegetable peels. "If you can't follow rules, you don't deserve them," she said flatly when I confronted her. I dug them out later, wiped them clean, and hid them under my bed. But the message was clear. Even the smallest choices would cost me battles. The fights grew bigger. College applications became the central war zone. She had a list taped to the fridge. Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton. Nothing else. I hesitated one evening as she rattled off deadlines. "What about state, or a smaller school? Somewhere I can figure out what I actually want?" Her head snapped toward me. "Stop talking nonsense. You're capable of more than that. Don't waste potential." "But I don't even know what I want to study," I admitted, voice cracking. "Then I'll decide for you. Business or law. Stable. Respectable." Her favorite phrase followed, the one that felt like a chain tightening around my throat. "You'll thank me later." But I didn't feel thankful. I felt suffocated. We clashed over everything: curfews, extracurriculars, even food. One Friday night, I wanted to grab pizza with friends after a debate meet. She said no. "Those kids are distractions. You need to come home and rest." "Rest?" I exploded. "You mean sit at my desk and work on more essays?" Her eyes blazed. "Don't take that tone with me. Haven't one expected to mast." "I'm 17, not 7, I shouted back. "You can't control everything I do." The room went silent. My little sister, sitting at the table, stared down at her plate. My dad cleared his throat, trying to cut the tension, but no one moved. For the first time, I had raised my voice in open rebellion. And for the first time, she didn't just scold me, she looked at me like I had betrayed her. The Cold War started after that. She stopped asking me about my day. She spoke in clipped sentences, all business. "Dinner's ready. Deadline tomorrow. Lights out." The silence was suffocating, but I refused to back down. I started carving out secret spaces of freedom. I listened to music on my phone with cheap earbuds when she thought I was studying. I scribbled short stories in a notebook I hid under my mattress. I texted friends she disapproved of, deleting the threads so she wouldn't find them. Each secret felt dangerous, but it also felt like oxygen, until she found the notebook. It was a Tuesday evening. I walked into the kitchen and froze. My notebook was sitting open on the table, flipped to a page where I'd written, "I feel like I'm living in a cage." My mom was standing beside it, arms crossed. So this is what you do instead of working? Writing nonsense about how terrible your life is? I felt the blood drain from my face. That's not nonsense. That's how I feel. Her voice rose, sharp and cutting. Ungrateful. That's what you are. Do you have any idea how many kids would kill for the chances you've had? For a mother who actually cares about their future? I clenched my fists. You don't care about me. You care about control. Her eyes flashed with fury. Everything I've done is for you. You'll thank me when you're successful. I grabbed the notebook, my hands shaking. Maybe success isn't what you think it is. Her voice dropped low. As long as you live under my roof, you'll follow my rules. I stormed upstairs and slammed my door, my chest heaving. I sat on my bed with the notebook clutched to my chest, shaking with anger and fear. That was the night I realized college wasn't just the next step. It was my escape plan. But the battles didn't stop. In the weeks that followed, we argued about everything. Shoes, essays, friends, curfews. It was like every day brought a new confrontation. One night, she barged into my room holding a draft of my college essay. "This isn't good enough," she said, waving the paper. "You need to sound more ambitious, more focused. I'll rewrite it." I yanked it from her hand. "It's supposed to be my essay." She glared at me. "Do you want to get in or not?" "Not like this," I snapped. "If they don't want me for me, then what's the point?" She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "The point is winning. The point is proving you're the best," I shouted back. "No, the point is living my own life." The words hung in the air like a grenade that had just gone off. She didn't yell. She just turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. The silence after that fight was heavier than ever. She stopped leaving clothes on my bed in the morning. She stopped checking my assignments. She stopped speaking to me unless it was absolutely necessary. At first, I thought I'd won. Finally, she was backing off. But then I realized what her silence really was: punishment. She knew how much I craved approval, and she was starving me of it. Every meal felt like ice. She passed plates without looking at me. The drive to school was dead quiet, the radio filling the space where conversation used to be. It was torture. And yet, beneath the pain, something else was growing. A stubborn, burning determination. Because if she wouldn't give me freedom, I'd take it myself. I didn't know what that would look like yet, but I knew one thing. The cage had cracks now, and sooner or later, it was going to break. The college application season turned our house into a war zone. Every evening, my mom would sit at the kitchen table with her laptop open, spreadsheets on the screen, deadlines circled in red ink. She spoke in clipped, efficient commands. "Finish this essay tonight. Update your resume. Practice interview questions." I was no longer a person. I was a project she was determined to complete. One Saturday morning, she called me downstairs. "I've scheduled you for 3 more practice interviews with alumni next week. Cancel whatever else you have." I shook my head. "I can't. I have plans." Her eyes narrowed. "Plans? What plans?" I hesitated, knowing she wouldn't approve. "I'm going out with friends." "Friends?" she snapped, like the word itself was an insult. "You don't have time for distractions. This is the most important year of your life." I clenched my fists. "Maybe it's not just about getting into some school you picked. Maybe I want a life outside of this." Her face twisted with anger. "You think life is about pizza and hanging out at the mall? Grow up." The argument ended the way most did, her slamming a door, me retreating to my room with my chest tight and my head pounding. But the cracks were spreading wider. The first acceptance letter arrived in December. It was from State, one of the only schools I'd applied to against her wishes. I'd filled out the application secretly, late at night, hiding the confirmation email in a folder she didn't check. When the envelope came, I tore it open in my room. Accepted. Not Ivy League, not top 10, but it was mine. A choice I had made on my own. I sat on my bed staring at the letter, my hands trembling. For the first time, I felt a flicker of control over my future. Of course, she found out. I came home from school one day to see the letter lying on the kitchen counter. She stood beside it, arms crossed. "What is this?" she demanded. I swallowed. "It's my acceptance to State." Her voice rose. "You applied behind my back?" "Yes," I admitted, my pulse hammering in my ears, because I wanted at least one school that was my choice. Her hands shook as she held up the paper. "Do you want to throw your life away? Do you want to settle for mediocrity when you could be great?" I snapped. "I don't want to be your definition of great. I want to figure out what I want." Her eyes filled with fury. "You're making a mistake you'll regret forever." I stood taller than I'd ever dared before. Then, at least it'll be my mistake. The months that followed were a blur of tension. Letters from other schools trickled in, some acceptances, some rejections. She cared only about the ones from her list. When I got into a top-tier school, she acted like it was her personal victory. When I got rejected, she acted like it was my failure. Meanwhile, I kept the State letter hidden in my desk drawer, pulling it out at night just to remind myself it was real. The final explosion came in April, when decisions had to be made. We sat at the kitchen table, a stack of acceptance letters between us. She pointed at the Ivy League one, her voice sharp with authority. "This is where you're going. No discussion." I shook my head. "No, I'm going to state." The room went silent, the air heavy. Her hands trembled as she slammed the table. "Do you understand what you're throwing away? Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to get you here?" I met her eyes. "That's the problem. You worked, you chose, you controlled. This is my life, and I'm taking it back." Her face crumpled, shifting from fury to something almost like despair. "After everything I've done for you, you're abandoning me." I took a deep breath, my voice steady even as my heart raced. "I'm not abandoning you. I'm finally choosing me." She broke down crying, the first time I'd ever seen her look small. My dad hovered in the doorway, helpless, as the weight of years of control shattered in one night. The summer before college was unbearable. Every conversation turned into a fight. She tried guilt, threats, even silent treatment. But my decision was set. The letter from state became my lifeline. When August came, we packed the car in tense silence. The drive to campus felt endless. She didn't speak the whole way, just stared out the window, her jaw clenched. When we arrived, she helped carry boxes into the dorm room without a word. Finally, as we stood by the door, she said quietly, "You'll regret this." I met her eyes and said, "Maybe, but at least it'll be mine." She left without hugging me. That first night in the dorm, lying on a bed that was truly my own, I felt terrified and free all at once. For the first time, the choices ahead of me weren't written in her handwriting. They were blank pages, waiting for me to fill them. And as scary as that was, it was also the most alive I'd ever felt. Moving into college was like stepping onto another planet. The first morning, I woke up in my dorm room to sunlight streaming through the blinds. No one had laid out clothes on the end of my bed. No calendar of deadlines was taped to the wall. No one knocked on the door to ask if I'd eaten breakfast yet. For the first time in my life, I had silence and choices. But the silence felt less like peace and more like standing in the middle of a wide, empty field with no map. I opened my closet. Jeans, t-shirts, sneakers I'd bought with my own money. No polos, no ironed khakis. I stared at them for 15 minutes, paralyzed. What did I actually want to wear? Did it even matter? I pulled on a plain shirt and sat at the edge of the bed, realizing how strange it felt to dress myself without judgment hanging in the air. That was the first taste of freedom, and the first taste of confusion. The dining hall was another shock. Rows of food, pizza, pasta, salad, cereal, ice cream machines humming in the corner. Nobody stood beside me whispering what was healthy or productive. I froze in the middle of the line, tray in hand, staring at the choices. Finally, I grabbed a slice of pizza and a soda. When I sat down, the greasy cheese burned my tongue, and the fizz of carbonation made my nose sting. I hadn't tasted soda in years. My mom had banned it at home. It felt rebellious and ridiculous at the same time. I laughed quietly to myself, realizing how something so small could feel like breaking a rule. But the hardest part was classes. On the first day, professors handed out syllabi and said, "You're responsible for keeping up. I won't remind you." No hovering, no deadlines taped to the fridge, no constant oversight. Just freedom and responsibility. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I panicked. That night, I sat in the library with the syllabus spread out, highlighting dates, writing reminders, building a schedule. My hands shook as I filled in my planner. Without my mom dictating every move, I was terrified I'd mess it all up. I realized then, freedom wasn't just exciting, it was exhausting. Because now, every choice was mine. Social life was another battlefield. On my second week, a guy down the hall knocked on my door. "We're heading to a party. Want to come?" I froze. I'd never been to a party. My mom had kept me so isolated that I didn't even know what college parties looked like outside of movies. Maybe," I stammered. "Come on," he grinned. "It'll be fun." So I went. The music was loud, the air smelled like sweat and alcohol, and people were laughing in ways that felt so effortless. I stood in the corner, clutching a soda cup, heart pounding, not sure how to move or talk or even stand. Someone asked me what music I liked. I froze again, the same way I had in high school. My brain scrambled. I muttered something generic about liking everything, and they nodded politely before drifting away. I felt like an alien wearing human skin. I left early that night, walking back across campus with the cool air on my face, wondering if I'd ever figure out how to actually live. But slowly, the small moments started adding up. I tried food I'd never eaten before. I signed up for classes. I was curious about philosophy, creative writing, just to see how they felt. I bought a cheap sketchbook from the bookstore and started doodling when lectures got boring. I made mistakes too. I overslept and missed class. I wasted money on things I didn't need. I burned pasta so badly the smoke alarm went off. Each failure stung, but each one was mine. And with every mistake, I learned something I'd never been taught at home: how to adjust, how to recover, how to decide again. The real turning point came a month in. I was sitting in the library, staring at an assignment I didn't understand, panic rising in my chest. The old voice in my head whispered, "You're going to fail. You need someone to fix this for you." But no one was there, no mom to hover, no safety net, just me. So I closed the laptop, walked to the tutoring center, and asked for help. It was terrifying, admitting I didn't know what I was doing, but the tutor explained the concept patiently, and slowly, it clicked. I walked out of that room with a smile, not because I'd solved the assignment, but because I had chosen to solve it myself. For the first time, I felt like I was building muscles I'd never used, decision muscles, independence muscles. They ached, but they were growing. Not everything was smooth. Some nights, the loneliness hit hard. I'd sit in my dorm scrolling through my phone, seeing photos of my old classmates smiling in groups while I struggled to fit in. I'd hear my mom's voice in my head, scolding me, guiding me, haunting me. Sometimes, I almost called her, just to hear her tell me what to do, to lift the weight of choice off my shoulders. But I stopped myself every time, because I knew one call would pull me right back into the cage I'd worked so hard to escape. Instead, I learned to sit with the silence, to write in my notebook, to let the fear settle until it became something else, strength. By the end of the first semester, I wasn't the same person who had arrived paralyzed by pizza choices and sneakers. I was still awkward, still figuring things out, still carrying scars from years of control, but I was also starting to believe something new, that I could actually choose. And maybe, just maybe, I could trust myself to live with the consequences. Second semester felt different from the very first week. I came back from winter break with my own clothes stuffed into my suitcase, t-shirts I'd bought, jeans I actually liked, the sneakers my mom once threw in the trash. Packing them felt like smuggling freedom back to campus. Winter break itself had been brutal. Back at home, my mom tried to reassert control the second I walked through the door. She asked for my syllabi, quizzed me about professors, demanded to know my grades before the registrar even posted them. I gave her clipped answers, keeping most details hidden. Every conversation turned into a tug of war, until I stopped talking altogether. On New Year's Eve, she looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You're changing." I met her eyes and replied, "Good." Her fork clattered against the plate, but I didn't back down. For once, silence worked in my favor. When I returned to campus in January, the air felt lighter, like I could finally breathe again. Classes this time were different too. I signed up for Introduction to Philosophy, Creative Writing Workshop, and Psychology 101, alongside the math and science courses my mom would have approved. The first day of creative writing, the professor told us, "Write something true, even if it scares you." My pen hovered over the page before I wrote, "I've lived most of my life in someone else's script. This is my first attempt at my own." The words looked shaky but real. For once, I wasn't erasing myself to fit her expectations. Socially, I was still awkward, but I started making progress. I joined a small study group for psychology, and we'd meet at the campus cafe. The conversations drifted from class topics to movies, music, and life. When someone asked me what kind of music I liked, I admitted, "Honestly, I'm still figuring that out." Instead of judging me, they laughed. "That's fine. We'll make you a playlist." They sent me a list of songs that night, and I spent hours listening, one track after another. Some I hated, some I loved, but each choice felt like another door opening. The first real friendship I built was with a girl named Hannah from my writing class. She had messy hair, wore oversized hoodies, and carried a sketchbook everywhere. One afternoon after class, she caught me scribbling in my notebook. "What are you writing?" "Nothing," I said quickly, closing it. Years of secrecy had trained me to hide, but she smiled. "If it's nothing, you wouldn't be so protective." I hesitated before sliding the notebook across the table. She read a few lines and looked up. "This is good. You should share it." I shook my head. "I don't think so." She leaned back in her chair. "Then what's the point of writing if no one sees it?" That question haunted me. For years, I'd written in secret, terrified my mom would find out. But now, someone was telling me my words mattered. A few weeks later, I read a short piece aloud in class. My hands trembled, my voice cracked. But when I finished, the room was quiet in a good way. People nodded. A few even clapped. Walking out of that room, I felt lighter than I had in years. But the shadow of my mom still followed me. She called every Sunday, her voice sharp and insistent. "Send me your grades. What internships are you applying for? Remember, law school applications start early." I gave vague answers, dodged specifics. Sometimes I silenced the call altogether, then felt guilty for hours. One Sunday she caught me off guard. "Why aren't you answering? Are you hiding something?" I clenched my jaw. "I'm just busy." "You don't sound busy. You sound secretive." Her suspicion cut deep. For a moment, I almost confessed everything. My classes, my friends, my writing, just to ease the pressure. But then I pictured the look on her face, the way she'd twisted into criticism, and I swallowed the words. "Mom," I said finally, "I can't keep reporting to you like this." Silence. Then her voice dropped. "After everything I've done, you're shutting me out?" I felt my chest tighten, the old guilt clawing at me. "I'm not shutting you out. I'm just living my life." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on my bed staring at the phone, torn between relief and heartbreak. As the semester rolled on, I kept testing my independence in small ways. I got a part-time job at the campus library, shelving books and helping students find resources. The paycheck was small, but it was mine. I used it to buy things without asking permission. A backpack I liked, meals with friends, notebooks for writing. Every swipe of my debit card felt like rebellion. I even signed up for an open mic night at a cafe off campus. Hannah pushed me into it, grinning as she wrote my name on the list. That night, standing under the dim lights with a microphone in my hand, I read a piece about growing up without choices. My voice shook at first, but as I kept going, something shifted. People leaned in, listening. When I finished, the applause was louder than I expected. I walked off the stage with my heart racing, not from fear, but from exhilaration. For once, I wasn't invisible. Still, there were setbacks. I failed a quiz in philosophy because I forgot to study. I missed a library shift because I overslept. I spent too much money one weekend and had to eat instant noodles for a week. In the past, my mom would have scolded me until I cried. This time, I faced the failures alone. And strangely, that felt better. Because every mistake carried a lesson that belonged to me. By the end of sophomore year, I wasn't fully free. I still heard her voice in my head whenever I made choices. I still felt guilt when I ignored her calls. I still doubted myself, wondering if I'd collapse without her structure. But I also had proof now. Proof that I could stumble and still stand up again. Proof that I could build friendships, try new things, and even dream a little. And for the first time, I started to believe that maybe freedom wasn't about making perfect choices. Maybe it was just about making any choices at all. By the time junior year rolled around, I felt like I was living two lives. On campus, I was finally tasting freedom. I had friends who knew me for me, not just as the kid with perfect grades. I was working shifts at the library, paying for my own groceries, choosing classes I actually enjoyed. But at home, or whenever my mom called, I was still the child she'd built out of schedules and rules. Every conversation with her dragged me back into the cage I thought I'd escaped. The tug of war between those two lives nearly tore me apart. My friendships deepened that year. Hannah, the girl from my writing class, had become my closest friend. We spent hours in the cafe downtown, sketching and writing side by side. She had this way of asking questions that cut right through the surface. One afternoon she asked, "Do you ever feel like you don't actually know yourself?" I laughed bitterly. "That's my whole life." She tilted her head. "Then maybe you should start by asking the small stuff. What's your favorite food? Color? Season?" I froze. Most people would rattle off answers without thinking. For me, it felt like trying to solve a riddle. "I don't know," I admitted. She smiled gently. "Then figure it out. Try things. Keep what you like. Throw away what you don't. That's how you build yourself." It sounded simple, but for me, it was revolutionary. So I started small. I tried foods I'd never been allowed before: Chinese takeout, greasy burgers, ice cream at midnight. Some I loved, some made me sick, but each choice was mine. I bought clothes without asking permission: hoodies, jeans, even a leather jacket from a thrift shop. Wearing it for the first time, I caught my reflection in a window and barely recognized the person staring back. Bit by bit, I was piecing together an identity that wasn't pre-approved. Then came my first relationship. It started casually, a classmate named Aaron, from my psychology seminar. We studied together a few times, then grabbed coffee, then kept hanging out, even when there wasn't homework. He was funny, easygoing, and had this calm confidence that drew me in. One night, after hours of talking in the library, he walked me back to my dorm. At the door, he hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you want to go out sometime, like a date?" My stomach flipped. I'd never been on a date. My mom had made sure of that. Relationships were distractions, according to her. But I nodded anyway. "Yeah, I'd like that." Never Kerner. The first date was awkward. I spilled water. He told a bad joke. We both laughed too loudly, but it was real. And when he held my hand at the end of the night, something inside me shifted. For once, I felt wanted, not managed. We started dating quietly. Dinner at cheap diners, walks across campus, late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. It was messy, imperfect, and completely mine. Of course, my mom found out. It slipped during a phone call when she asked how I was spending so much time at the library. I mentioned Aaron without thinking. Her tone turned sharp. "Who is this Aaron? Is he distracting you?" "No," I said quickly. "He's just a friend." and its importance outdated came to the Godarach. Friends don't take up that much time. You're supposed to be focusing on your future. My jaw tightened. Maybe he is part of my future. Her gasp was sharp, like I'd cursed. You're wasting everything I built for you on some boy. I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. No, I'm building my own life now. She hung up on me. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, torn between guilt and relief. The distance between us widened after that. She sent long emails filled with advice, disguised as commands, lists of internships I needed to apply for, schedules I should follow, reminders about law school deadlines. I stopped replying. Each ignored email felt like another brick in the wall I was building between us. But sometimes, late at night, I'd read her words and feel the old pull of guilt. Was I throwing away her sacrifices? Was I selfish for wanting something different? Erin noticed one night when I was quiet at dinner. You're thinking about her again, aren't you? I sighed. I can't stop hearing her voice in my head. Even when she's not here, she's still here. He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You don't owe her your whole life. You deserve to figure out who you are. I wanted to believe him. Some days I did. Other days, the doubt was louder. By the end of junior year, I was split in two. The version of me my mom still tried to control from a distance, and the version of me that was slowly, painfully learning to live. I didn't know which one would win, but I knew one thing. The fight wasn't over. The summer after junior year, I thought things might finally settle down. I'd survived 3 years of tug-of-war with my mom, and though she still called and emailed constantly, the distance of being away at college gave me room to breathe. At home during summer break, I kept conversations short, dodged her questions, and spent most of my time working part-time jobs. It wasn't peaceful, exactly, but it was tolerable. Then, in late August, an email arrived. I'm planning to visit campus in October. We'll meet your professors, review your classes, and make sure you're on track for law school applications. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. But there it was, her handwriting in digital form, her plan laid out like it was final. She wasn't asking if she could visit. She was announcing it, like a CEO declaring a company audit. My chest tightened. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Instead, I closed the laptop and sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. The one place that had finally started to feel like mine was about to be invaded. When I told Erin, his jaw dropped. She's actually coming here? To, what? Inspect you? I nodded. She'll treat it like a business trip. Meetings, schedules, evaluations. That's how she works. He shook his head. You need to set boundaries, man. I know, I said. But boundaries don't work with her. She doesn't believe in them. She believes in control. Erin leaned back in his chair. Then this might be the fight that decides everything. I hated how right he was. October came fast. The morning of her arrival, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. I tried to clean my dorm, but no matter how neat I made it, I knew it wouldn't meet her invisible standards. When her car pulled up outside, gleaming in the autumn sun, I felt like a defendant waiting for judgment. She stepped out in a blazer and heels, her hair perfectly styled, her eyes already scanning the campus like she was assessing property value. Show me your dorm, she said instead of hello. No hug, no smile, just business. Walking her through the building was like dragging a critic through a play I hadn't rehearsed for. She wrinkled her nose at the worn carpets, the faint smell of ramen noodles in the hallway. This place is barely livable, she muttered. When we reached my room, she swept in like an inspector. Her gaze flicked over everything, clothes draped over a chair, books stacked unevenly, a sketch Hannah had given me taped to the wall. She pointed at the sketch. What's this? A drawing from a friend. Wasting your time, she said flatly. Friends don't matter if they don't advance your career. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from shouting. She opened my closet next, flipping through hoodies and jeans I'd bought myself. Her lips pressed thin. So this is what you're wearing now? No wonder you don't look polished. It's what I like, I said quietly. She gave me a sharp look. What you like doesn't matter. What matters is how you're seen. My stomach churned. The next morning, she insisted on meeting my professors. Mom, professors don't do parent conferences, I protested. Then I'll make them, she said briskly. And she did by emailing them directly. To my horror, a few actually agreed. The first meeting was with my philosophy professor. She strode in, shook his hand firmly, and announced, I'm his mother. I'd like to know how he's performing. The professor gave me a look, half pity, half curiosity before answering. He's doing well. He asks thoughtful questions. That's fine, she said. But is he disciplined? Focused? He's supposed to be preparing for law school. The professor raised an eyebrow. Actually, he's considering philosophy as a major. He has potential. Her head whipped toward me. Philosophy? She hissed, as if the word itself was dirty. My face burned. I wanted to sink into the floor. It didn't end there. She cornered my psychology professor too, grilling him about my grades, asking whether psychology was useful enough. She walked across campus with me afterward, her heels clicking like a metronome of disapproval. "You're wasting time on nonsense," she snapped. "Philosophy, psychology, writing, none of these will get you anywhere." I clenched my fists. "They're what I care about." She scoffed. "Caring doesn't matter, results matter." End quote. Her words echoed in my chest like chains. That evening, I made the mistake of introducing her to Aaron. We ran into him outside the library, and I thought maybe, just maybe, if she saw I had good people in my life, she'd back off. "This is Aaron," I said nervously. "We're close." Aaron extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs." She ignored his hand. Her eyes narrowed. "Are you the reason he's distracted? The reason his grades are slipping?" "Mom," I snapped. Aaron's face hardened, but he stayed calm. "I'm not a distraction. I care about him." Her voice dripped with disdain. "Caring won't get him into law school." I wanted the ground to swallow me. After she left, Aaron squeezed my shoulder. "You can't let her keep doing this to you." But all I felt was shame and anger twisting together like barbed wire. That night, everything boiled over. She barged into my dorm room, holding a draft of one of my essays. "This is weak, aimless. You need to sound more ambitious. I'll rewrite it." I snatched it from her hands. "It's my essay." She glared. "Do you want to get into a good school for law or not?" "I don't want law school." The words ripped out of me like fire. She froze. "What did you just say?" "I don't want law school. I don't want your plan. I don't want you controlling me anymore." Her face went white, then red. "Everything I've done has been for you. Every sacrifice, every choice. And you dare throw it back in my face?" Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't look away. "You didn't do it for me. You did it for control." She staggered back as if I'd struck her. "Control? I saved you from bad decisions, from failure, from ruining your life?" I shook my head. "No. You stopped me from living it." For a long moment, she just stared at me, trembling. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. "I don't know who you are anymore. Call me when you're ready to be serious." No signature, no goodbye. She drove off campus without saying a word. I sat on my bed with the note in my hands, my chest hollow. Part of me felt like I'd lost her forever, but another part, stronger, steadier, felt like I'd finally won something. For the first time, I wasn't just rebelling, I was declaring independence. And even though it hurt, even though it left me shaking, I knew I'd never go back. The week after my mom's visit felt like walking through the wreckage of a storm. Her absence should have been a relief. The campus was quiet again, my dorm was mine again, and there were no footsteps of heels clicking across the floor, no voice criticizing the smallest detail of my life. But the silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. She didn't call, she didn't text. She didn't send her usual barrage of emails with subject lines like, "internships you should apply for," or "why law is still your best option." For the first time in years, there was nothing. And somehow, that nothing was worse. At first, I told myself I was free. I ate pizza at midnight without guilt. I went to class in hoodies instead of button-downs. I met Aaron after work for late-night walks across campus, holding his hand without fear of who might see. But every time my phone buzzed, my stomach clenched, half expecting her name to appear. And when it didn't, a different kind of panic set in. Did she mean it when she said she didn't know who I was anymore? Was she done with me? I hated that the questions kept me awake at night. I hated that even after finally standing up to her, I still wanted her approval. Aaron noticed before I admitted it. We were sitting in the library one evening, him reading a textbook while I stared blankly at my laptop. "You're not working," he said gently. "I'm trying." "No, you're thinking about her." I sighed. What if she never forgives me? What if I really did throw away everything she built for me? Aaron closed his book. "What if what she built wasn't meant for you?" His words hit like a cold splash of water. He leaned closer. "You're not broken for wanting your own life. You're just finally living it." I nodded, but the guilt didn't fade so easily. The silence stretched into weeks. Then, slowly, the emails returned. Not long ones this time. Just short, clipped reminders. Law school deadlines approaching. Summer internships don't wait too long. Call me. No greetings, no signatures, just commands disguised as advice. I ignored the first few. But ignoring them didn't feel like strength. It felt like balancing on a ledge, waiting to fall. Finally, one night, I caved and called. Her voice was cool, professional, like we were colleagues on a strained work call. "So, have you thought about law school?" It's clear as not the first thing pressed back. "They will BS. The rest on that like another." I swallowed hard. "No, I told you I don't want that." Her sigh crackled through the speaker. "You're wasting potential. You'll regret this." And just like that, the cage slammed shut again, not physically, but in my head. After the call, I sat on my bed with my face in my hands, shaking. It was like no matter how far I ran, her voice followed. The next morning, Hannah found me at the cafe, staring into a cup of cold coffee. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't." She slid into the chair across from me. "Your mom again?" I nodded. She studied me for a moment before speaking softly. "You know, you're allowed to choose silence too, not just hers, yours. You don't have to answer every call. You don't have to keep explaining yourself to someone who doesn't listen." Her words sank in slowly, like seeds planting themselves in soil I hadn't realized was there. I started experimenting with silence. When she emailed about internships, I didn't reply. When she called 3 times in one day, I let it go to voicemail. The guilt clawed at me, but each ignored message gave me a sliver of peace. Instead, I poured myself into life on campus. I worked more shifts at the library, saving money to prove to myself, not to her, that I could survive without her. I went to open mics with Hannah, reading new pieces, shaking less each time. I spent weekends with Aaron, exploring parts of the city I'd never seen, eating street food, laughing until my stomach hurt. For the first time, I wasn't just avoiding my mom's control. I was actively building something else. But she wasn't done. One evening in November, an envelope arrived in my campus mailbox. Inside was a glossy brochure for a top-tier law program, with a sticky note attached. "Still time to change your mind. Think about your future." No love, Mom. No acknowledgement of the fight we'd had. Just another attempt to steer the wheel. I crumpled the brochure into a ball and shoved it in the trash. My hands were shaking, but this time, not from fear, from anger. She still didn't see me. She only saw the version of me she wanted to control. Thanksgiving break was the final test. I debated not going home at all, but the thought of spending the holiday alone on campus felt too heavy, so I boarded the bus with a knot in my stomach, rehearsing every possible argument. When I walked into the house, it was like stepping into a museum of my old life. The same neat rows of polos in my closet. The same family photos where I was smiling stiffly while my mom held me close. Dinner was tense. She asked about grades, internships, law school. I gave short, clipped answers. Finally, she said, "I just don't understand you anymore." I set down my fork. "That's because you've never tried to." Her face tightened. "I've done nothing but try. My whole life has been about guiding you." "Guiding isn't the same as controlling," I said quietly. She shook her head. "You'll see one day. When you're older, when you fail, you'll wish you'd listened." I met her eyes, steady this time. "Maybe. But if I fail, at least it'll be because of my choices." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. When I boarded the bus back to campus the next day, I felt drained but certain. She could keep sending brochures, emails, phone calls. She could keep trying to pull me back into her orbit. But for the first time, I knew something with absolute clarity. I didn't belong to her anymore. My life was mine. Even if it meant stumbling, even if it meant failing, even if it meant breaking ties I once thought unbreakable, I was free. Senior year felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out at a horizon I'd never seen before. On one side was everything I had fought through the years of control, the guilt, the battles with my mom. On the other side was everything unknown, a future that terrified me as much as it excited me. And in the middle, I was finally learning how to balance. By fall semester, I had carved out a rhythm. Classes in the mornings, library shifts in the afternoons, writing at night. My notebook was filling with short stories, fragments of essays, poems that I actually started sharing at open mics. Aaron was still by my side, steady and patient, reminding me with little gestures, holding my hand during stressful days, leaving snacks on my desk when I studied late that I didn't have to carry everything alone. Hannah kept pushing me creatively, sliding new prompts across cafe tables, daring me to go deeper in my writing. For once, I had people who saw me, not just my grades, and slowly, I started to believe I could see myself too. Then came the emails. This time, they weren't just short reminders. They were long, emotional appeals. "I've sacrificed everything for you. I can't believe you'd throw it all away on writing and philosophy. Do you really think you'll survive without a stable career, without guidance? Law school deadlines are closing. If you don't apply now, you'll regret it forever." Each message was like a hook trying to reel me back in. I didn't respond, not at first. But ignoring her didn't feel like victory. It felt like walking around with weights tied to my chest. One night in October, she called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to face it. When I answered, her voice was tight. "So it's true? You're not applying to law school? All a star?" "No," I said quietly. "You're ruining your life." I closed my eyes. "No, Mom, I'm saving it." She went silent, then snapped, "You're ungrateful. After everything I've done, this is how you repay me?" Tears stung my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "I never asked you to live my life for me." She hung up. The click of the call ending echoed louder than her words. In November, she escalated. I came back to my dorm one evening to find her sitting outside the building, arms crossed, a suitcase at her feet. My stomach dropped. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I couldn't just sit back and watch you destroy yourself," she said. "So I'm staying until you come to your senses. Have to get 'em and they're using and too spurious." Panic surged through me. My dorm wasn't her house. My campus wasn't her kingdom. But she looked so certain, so immovable, that I felt 12 years old again. Powerless. I called Aaron. He came immediately, standing beside me with quiet strength. "Mrs." he began gently, but she cut him off. "You," she snapped. "You're the distraction. You're the reason he's throwing everything away." Aaron didn't flinch. "No, I'm the reason he's finally figuring out who he is." Her face flushed with fury. "You're poisoning him." I stepped forward, my hands shaking. "No, Mom. This is me. These choices are mine." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears. "You'll regret this. I don't resters of that muncum." And for the first time in my life, I looked her in the eye and said, "Maybe, but it'll be my regret." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. She grabbed her suitcase and stormed off into the night. I stood there, trembling, but also lighter than I'd ever felt. The weeks after that were quiet. No emails, no calls, no surprise visits. At first, I thought she was regrouping, planning her next move. But as the silence stretched, I realized something. Maybe she had finally understood that her grip was slipping. Maybe she knew she'd lost. Graduation loomed in the spring, and with it, the biggest decision of my life: what to do next. For the first time, I wasn't paralyzed by the question. I wasn't flipping through her plans, her expectations, her spreadsheets. I was listening to myself. I applied for a writing fellowship and a position at the campus library full-time. I didn't know if either would work out, but they were mine. The day I submitted the applications, I walked across campus with the late afternoon sun on my face, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The last test came at graduation. As I lined up in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for familiar faces, I spotted her, sitting stiffly in the front row, arms folded, eyes locked on me. My heart skipped. When my name was called and I walked across the stage, I half expected her to stand, to smile, to clap. She didn't. But when I shook the dean's hand and took the diploma, I didn't look at her. I looked at Aaron, at Hannah, at the friends who were cheering with wild joy. For the first time, I realized I didn't need her applause. I'd already chosen myself. Graduation didn't feel like an ending. It felt like standing at the edge of a wide, open road. No guardrails, no maps, just miles of possibility stretching in every direction. When the ceremony ended, caps flying into the air, I held my diploma tight against my chest. Not because of what it meant to my mom or what it looked like on paper, but because it was proof. Proof that I'd survived. Proof that I could choose. But survival and living are two different things. And stepping into the real world meant learning that lesson all over again. The first months after graduation were messy. I moved into a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, the kind of place my mom would have sneered at. To me, it was a palace. The rent ate up most of my savings, but every squeaky floorboard, every crooked cabinet door was mine. I furnished it slowly: secondhand, couch, thrift store dishes, a mattress on the floor. I burned toast on my first attempt at breakfast. I left laundry in the dryer until it wrinkled. I learned the hard way that forgetting to pay the electric bill means sitting in the dark with melted ice cream dripping down your freezer. Each mistake was frustrating, sometimes humiliating, but each mistake was also mine. And I realized something important. Independence isn't glamorous. It's leaky faucets and overdue bills and figuring out how to cook pasta without turning it into glue. But it's also freedom. Work came next. The library offered me a full-time position, and I took it. The pay wasn't spectacular, but I loved it. The smell of books, the quiet hum of people learning, the satisfaction of helping someone find exactly what they needed. On my lunch breaks, I scribbled in my notebook or typed drafts on my laptop. The writing fellowship I'd applied for sent back a polite rejection, but instead of crushing me, it lit a fire. For the first time, rejection didn't mean failure. It meant trying again. Every night, after long shifts, I sat by my crooked little desk, filling pages, essays, stories, fragments of memories I'd never been allowed to put into words. It wasn't about publication yet. It was about finally hearing my own voice. But the shadow of my mom didn't vanish with a diploma or a lease agreement. She still called. She still emailed. "You can't live on that salary. Are you applying to grad school? It's not too late. This is a phase. You'll come back to your senses." Sometimes I ignored her. Sometimes I answered out of guilt. One evening, after a long day at work, she called while I was eating takeout on my secondhand couch. "I found a law program with late applications," she said without greeting. "Send me your resume. I'll edit it." I closed my eyes, exhaustion pressing down. Mom, I told you, I'm not going to law school. Her voice hardened. You're being childish. You think you can scrape by in some apartment forever? What about stability? What about status? My hands shook, but I steadied my voice. I don't want your version of stability. I want mine. Silence stretched, heavy and cutting. Then she said, You'll regret this. Don't call me when you fail. The line went dead. I sat in the glow of the takeout container, heart pounding, but also strangely relieved. Because this time, her words didn't feel like chains. They felt like echoes. Loud, yes, but fading. The scars showed up in other ways, too. I struggled with decisions, what to buy, where to go, even what to eat. Years of being told what was right and wrong left me second-guessing myself constantly. A simple grocery trip could take an hour of standing in the aisle, paralyzed between two brands of cereal. Dating wasn't easy either. Aaron and I stayed together for a while after graduation, but the weight of my past bled into the relationship. I was hesitant to trust, hesitant to let someone in fully. Eventually, we drifted apart, not with anger, but with a quiet sadness. Still, every choice, even the painful ones, was practice. Practice in being my own person. There were victories, too. I published my first short essay in a small online magazine. The paycheck was tiny, but seeing my name on the byline felt like standing on top of a mountain. Friends came over to my apartment, and I cooked dinner that didn't burn. We sat on the mismatched chairs, laughing, spilling drinks on the thrift store rug, and for once, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was living. Months turned into a year. I wasn't rich. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't following the path my mom had carved out with spreadsheets and deadlines. But I was standing, on my own 2 feet. And that to me was success. One evening, I found an old box while cleaning. Inside were pieces of my childhood, the ironed polos, the awards she'd forced me to chase, the neatly typed schedules of extracurriculars, artifacts of the life she'd built for me. I sat on the floor, running my hands over them. For a moment, I felt the old weight pressing in, the voice that told me I wasn't enough unless I followed the plan. Then I took a deep breath, closed the box, and slid it into the back of the closet. Not destroyed because those years were part of me, but not on display either. I wasn't erasing the past. I was choosing not to live in it. Time has a way of softening edges, but it doesn't erase them. A few years after graduation, my life looked different. I wasn't the kid trapped in a schedule anymore. I wasn't the student fighting battles in dorm rooms and phone calls. I was an adult now, with bills to pay, a job that kept me grounded, and a growing sense of who I was. But the shadow of my mom still lingered, stretched long across my days. I had moved into a slightly better apartment by then, one with windows that actually locked, and a kitchen where the faucet didn't leak constantly. The walls were still thin, but the space was mine. I hung photos of friends on the wall, shelves filled with books I'd chosen myself, and taped a few of my own essays in print next to them. Proof, tangible and visible, that I was building a life from my own choices. Work at the library had turned steady. I wasn't getting rich, but I had health insurance, a steady paycheck, and coworkers who felt like family. On weekends, I picked up freelance writing gigs, slowly stitching together a portfolio. My name appeared in small publications here and there, each one like a quiet rebellion against the silence I grew up in. And yet, every time something went wrong, a missed bill, a rejection letter, a day where I overslept and felt unproductive, her voice rose in my head again. See, you can't handle this without me. You're failing because you didn't listen. You'll regret choosing this path. It was like she'd planted a permanent critic inside me. Sometimes, it showed up in strange ways. One morning I stood in the grocery aisle staring at 2 brands of pasta sauce. I must have been there 10 minutes, frozen. Not because it really mattered, but because the act of deciding still felt dangerous. Her voice echoed in my head. You'll pick the wrong one. You'll waste money. You're not practical enough. Finally, I grabbed one at random and shoved it in the cart, my chest tight like I'd broken a rule. Later, cooking dinner, I tasted the sauce and realized it was fine. Not amazing, not terrible, just fine. And that was the lesson. Sometimes choices don't have to be perfect. They just have to be yours. I still heard from her occasionally. The emails were less frequent, but they came in waves. You should still consider graduate school. It's not too late. Writing isn't a career. Don't waste your potential. You'll thank me someday when you finally understand. Sometimes I ignored them. Sometimes I replied with short, polite sentences that ended the conversation before it started. Phone calls were rarer, but when they happened, they still had the power to pull me back into old patterns. She'd ask loaded questions. Are you stable? Are you happy? The words sounded like concern, but they carried judgment. I learned to answer carefully, like walking a tightrope, not giving her fuel, not giving her ammunition, but every call left me drained, as if the part of me that still craved her approval kept losing battles against the part that knew I'd never get it. What surprised me most was how her control had shaped not just my choices, but my sense of self. In relationships, I found myself waiting for permission that never came. With friends, I worried about saying the wrong thing, about being too much or not enough. At work, I hesitated before making decisions, second-guessing every instinct. Control doesn't just vanish when the person leaves. It stays in your skin, like a tattoo you never agreed to. Therapy helped. It took me a long time to admit I needed it. Growing up, therapy was something my mom dismissed as weakness. Other people may need it, she'd say, but not us. But sitting across from a therapist for the first time, spilling stories I'd never spoken aloud, felt like breathing clean air. She helped me name what I'd lived through: control, enmeshment, lack of autonomy, words that turned my chaos into something I could understand. Your mom believed control was love, she said one session. But love without freedom isn't love, it's ownership. The sentence stuck with me. Ownership. That's what my childhood had been. Not parenting. Ownership. And now, adulthood was the long, slow process of reclaiming myself. I began to notice progress in small, ordinary ways. I bought clothes without overthinking. I tried new foods without panicking about wasting money. I made travel plans with friends, deciding where to go without needing a checklist of approval. Every decision, big or small, became an act of healing. One night, I sat on my couch eating takeout with Hannah and another friend, laughter spilling into the room, and I realized I wasn't bracing for criticism anymore. My mom's voice wasn't gone, but it was quieter. And then came the letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter, in her handwriting, delivered to my mailbox one Tuesday afternoon. I opened it carefully, half expecting accusations. Instead, it was 3 sentences. I don't understand the choices you've made, but you're still my child. I hope one day we can talk without fighting. I sat there staring at the paper, my heart twisting. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something a crack in the armor she'd worn my whole life. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to rush in, to defend myself, to argue. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to myself, maybe someday, because someday didn't have to be today. Life moved on. Slowly, steadily, I built pieces of myself she'd never controlled. And though the scars still ached, though the echoes still whispered, I was learning that freedom isn't one big leap. It's 1,000 small choices, repeated every day. And with each one, I felt myself becoming more and more my own. Healing isn't dramatic. It isn't a single moment where everything suddenly feels whole. It's slow, it's clumsy, it's eating dinner alone without feeling empty. It's buying the wrong brand of coffee and realizing the world doesn't end. It's saying no to people, even when your voice shakes. And for me, it was learning that freedom isn't just about cutting ties, it's about weaving new ones with care. A few years after graduation, my life had settled into something steady. I was still at the library, but now in a higher position, coordinating programs, running events, mentoring new staff. I'd published more essays, a handful in bigger magazines, enough that people started recognizing my name in niche circles. It wasn't fame, but it was validation. I had friends who felt like family, people I could call at midnight without apology. I had routines I'd chosen myself. Saturday morning walks to the cafe, Sunday afternoons spent writing at the park, Friday nights cooking simple meals in my little apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Relationships were harder. After Aaron, I dated a few people, but my past always lingered like a shadow. I worried about being controlled, about losing myself again. I worried about being too much, or not enough. One partner once asked me, half joking, "Why do you always check with me before making tiny decisions, like what movie to watch?" I laughed it off, but the truth was simple. Because for most of my life, decisions hadn't been mine. They had to be approved. Breaking that pattern took years. But slowly, I learned to trust myself and to trust people who respected that. One spring, I met someone new, Claire, a fellow writer I'd crossed paths with at an open mic. She had a quiet strength, the kind of presence that made you feel safe without words. On our first date, she asked, "So what do you like to do for fun?" For once, I didn't freeze. I smiled and said, "Writing, obviously, but also long walks, cooking badly, and exploring used bookstores." She laughed. "Cooking badly, huh? That's an art form in itself." It was a small moment, but I realized something important. I didn't need to hide anymore. We grew close over time, and with her, I practiced something I'd never known before. Choosing together, not under pressure, but in partnership. Where to eat, what to do on weekends, how to spend holidays, we made those decisions as a team. Sometimes I hesitated, still fighting the old paralysis, but she never rushed me. Once when I agonized over which desk to buy for my apartment, she smiled and said, "You can't pick the wrong one. You can only pick the one you'll use." It was the kind of sentence that sounds obvious to most people, But to me, it was revolutionary. And then there was my mom. For years, our contact had been sparse. A handful of emails, the occasional phone call that ended in clipped silence. But one winter, she reached out again, not with a command, not with criticism, with a simple question. Can we have dinner? I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, the part still carrying the child who wanted her approval, ached to say yes. In the end, I agreed. Not because I needed her to change, but because I had. We met at a small restaurant halfway between our cities. When she walked in, she looked older. Not weak, not diminished, but less sharp around the edges. Her hair was grayer, her posture a little stooped. For a moment, I saw her not as the towering figure who had controlled every detail of my life, but as a person, flawed, human. We ordered food. Small talk stumbled between us. Finally, she sighed. I don't know how we got here. I swallowed. We got here because you tried to live my life for me. Her eyes glistened. I thought I was protecting you. I know, I said, but protection without freedom isn't love. It's a cage. She flinched, like the word hurt. Silence stretched. Then she whispered, Do you hate me? I took a long breath. No, I don't hate you, but I had to let go of your version of me to find my own. Tears slid down her cheeks. For once, she didn't argue. We didn't solve everything that night. She didn't apologize in the grand way I sometimes fantasized about. She didn't suddenly accept my choices with open arms. But she listened. And for me, that was enough. Healing isn't about rewriting the past. It's about making peace with it. I left the restaurant with a strange mix of grief and relief. I knew she'd never be the mother I once wished for. But I also knew I didn't need her approval anymore. Because I had something stronger, my own voice, my own choices, my own life. That night, back in my apartment, I sat at my desk and opened my notebook. I wrote one sentence across the page. I am not the product of her control. I am the proof of my own freedom. For the first time, the words felt not like rebellion, but like truth. Time kept moving, as it always does. By the time a decade had passed since graduation, I barely recognized the person I used to be, the kid afraid to pick a class, the teenager paralyzed in the dining hall, the college student trembling at every phone call from home. That version of me still lived inside, but he wasn't steering anymore. I had a career, a community, and a life that, while imperfect, was mine in every sense. The library job had evolved. What started as shelving books and helping students find resources turned into managing entire programs, coordinating with schools, and even speaking at conferences about literacy initiatives. Public speaking once terrified me. I'd grown up so afraid of saying the wrong thing. But now, standing in front of an audience, I found myself energized. I wasn't speaking for my mom, or for her expectations. I was speaking because I had something worth sharing. Writing remained the heartbeat underneath everything. My portfolio grew steadily. Online essays, guest pieces in magazines, a couple of short stories published in print. Eventually, I collected enough work to put together a manuscript. It wasn't flashy, but it was a book, a memoir, really, about control and freedom, about the long road to learning how to choose. When the first copy arrived in the mail, I held it in my hands and thought, this is proof. Not just to the world, but to myself. Claire and I had built a life together by then. We moved into a modest apartment with creaky floors and a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs. We filled the shelves with books, the kitchen with mismatched mugs, and the walls with photos from trips we'd taken, small towns, beaches, forests where we'd gotten lost on trails, and laughed until our legs ached. Living with someone meant compromise, and compromise meant decisions. What color curtains? Which side of the bed? How to split chores? At first, those choices triggered the old paralysis. I'd freeze, afraid of picking wrong, of disappointing her. But Claire never pressured me. She'd say, there's no wrong answer, only ours. I have to set it looks deprived with a back of the common in panoply. Slowly I believed her. The question of children eventually surfaced. One evening, sitting on the balcony with tea in our hands, Claire asked gently, do you ever think about being a parent? My chest tightened. Sometimes. But I'm terrified. Of what? Of becoming her, I admitted. Of controlling instead of loving. Of passing the cage down. Claire squeezed my hand. The fact that you're worried about that means you won't. You're aware. You've broken the cycle already. Her words comforted me, but the fear lingered. Because cycles don't just disappear. They lurk. They wait. And I knew if I ever became a parent, I'd have to face mine head on. Meanwhile, my relationship with my mom hovered in a fragile truce. We saw each other a few times a year, holidays, occasional dinners. She'd softened, age carving gentler lines into her face, but her need for control still flickered beneath the surface. Are you saving enough? She'd ask. Do you have a real plan? Writing is fine as a hobby, but what about security? I used to fight those comments. Now, I let them pass like background noise. Because I knew something she didn't, I was already secure. Not because of money or prestige, but because I belonged to myself. She never fully understood that, and maybe she never would. But I didn't need her to anymore. The turning point came at a family gathering one spring. A cousin's child ran into the room, messy-haired and laughing, holding a drawing he'd made. His mom knelt down, took the paper, and said, "I love it. Tell me about it." I watched the child's face light up as he explained every scribble, and in that moment I realized that's what I'd needed all along. Not someone to perfect my work, not someone to tell me what to do, just someone to say, "Show me who you are. I want to know." That night I wrote in my journal, "If I ever become a parent, that's the promise I'll make. To guide, not to own. To listen, not to dictate. To love without conditions." Breaking the cycle wasn't just about resisting control. It was about building something new in its place. By my mid-30s, the fear of becoming her had loosened its grip. I wasn't her. I'd chosen differently. Again and again, in small ways and big ways, I'd proven to myself that love doesn't have to look like control. And maybe, just maybe, the scars she left weren't just wounds. Maybe they were maps showing me where not to go, how not to parent, how not to love. One evening, sitting on that same balcony with Claire, I looked out at the city lights and whispered, "I think I'm ready." "For what?" she asked. "For a family." She smiled, eyes warm. "Then, let's build one together. I'd be do this klawa and found a fani." In that moment, I felt something I never thought I'd feel. Not fear, not hesitation, but hope. Because I knew the cycle stopped with me. Looking back now, decades later, the story feels both distant and sharp, like a scar that's healed but still remembers the blade. I'm older, gray in my hair, lines around my eyes, a life full of choices behind me. Choices that, once upon a time, I didn't know how to make. And when I trace the path that brought me here, it always leads back to her, to the control, the rules, the cage disguised as love, to the years where I thought I didn't have a self at all. But it also leads beyond her to freedom, to mistakes, to love that didn't come with conditions, to the life I built, piece by piece, because I finally learned to choose. In the later years, my relationship with my mom softened. Time does that. It takes the sharp edges and rounds them, even if it doesn't erase them. She grew older, slower, less certain. The woman who once barked orders like a general became someone who sometimes forgot what day it was. We spoke on the phone more often, not because I needed her approval, but because I understood something. She had lived her whole life under the belief that control was the same as care. And while that belief had hurt me, it had also come from fear. She was terrified of the world hurting me, so she tried to build a fortress. She just didn't realize she'd built it out of bars. One day, near the end, she told me softly, "I know I pushed too hard. I just didn't know another way." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I know. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest she could give, and I chose to take it. When she passed, I felt a strange mix of grief and release. Grief for the mother I never truly had, the one who might have cheered me on instead of charting my course. Release from the shadow I'd carried for so long. At the funeral, I stood before a small gathering of relatives and spoke. I didn't tell the whole story, not the rules, not the battles, not the scars. Instead, I said, she believed she was protecting me, and maybe, in her own way, she was. But what I carry with me is this. She showed me how important it is to let someone be themselves. And because of that, I live differently, and I'm grateful for that lesson. It wasn't the truth in full, but it was the truth I could live with. Now, with children of my own, grown, living their own lives, I see clearly how easy it would have been to repeat her mistakes. Every parent feels the urge to protect, to steer, to correct. The world is dangerous, and fear whispers. If you control them, you can keep them safe. But I've learned that safety without freedom isn't safety at all. It's suffocation. So I chose differently. When my daughter wanted to dye her hair blue at 14, I let her. When my son decided to quit soccer and join the theater, I didn't argue. When they made mistakes, failing classes, dating the wrong people, getting lost, I stood beside them. But I didn't take the wheel. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes I wanted to step in, to fix, to direct. But every time, I remembered the cage I grew up in, and I chose to hold the door open instead. Now, watching them as adults, I see the difference. They know how to choose. They know how to stumble and stand again. They trust themselves in ways I never did at their age. And that, more than any degree or career or achievement, feels like success. Because the cycle stopped with me. I still write, though less urgently than before. My books line a shelf in my study, some well-reviewed, some barely noticed. But each one is a reminder. My voice exists. My choices exist. Sometimes I flip back through old notebooks, the ones from college, filled with shaky handwriting and half-finished sentences about cages and freedom. I read them and smile, not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the journey. I think of the boy who once froze in a dining hall line, terrified to pick between pizza and salad. And I want to tell him, you'll learn, it'll take time, it'll hurt, but one day you'll choose without fear, and that will be the sweetest freedom of all. The last time I visited my mom's grave, I brought nothing but silence. I stood there, hands in my pockets, wind tugging at my jacket, and whispered, I forgive you, not because she asked, not because she changed, but because carrying anger isn't the same as carrying freedom. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about excusing what happened. It's about refusing to let it own you anymore. And walking away that day, I felt light. If there's one lesson my life has taught me, it's this. Control masquerading as love isn't love. True love is letting someone be who they are even when it scares you, even when they fall. I didn't learn that from my mom's example. I learned it by surviving her. And because of that, the story ends here, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to fail, freedom to live. And for me, that has always been the point.